Strangers by Taichi Yamada. Translated by Wayne Lammers. Chapter 15. I needed to get to work on the second episode of the series. I'd been able to dash off the first with preternatural ease, and I expected the second to come likewise with no great difficulty. But when I sat down to write at a little past 7, after sharing a light dinner with Kay, some microwave pizza, a bowl of instant soup, and a simple salad, in the warm afterglow of our amorous exertions, I found that I could not produce a single sentence. An hour sped by in seemingly no time at all. Kay had temporarily put my mind off the incident in Asakusa, but now it repossessed me, and no dramatic scene I could conjure seemed vivid enough in contrast. I found it impossible to shunt that unforgettable experience aside and direct my attention to a comedy of manners about men and women who spent a hell of a lot of time playing billiards and tennis. This is bad. It did not seem like the sort of impasse I could break simply by trying harder. The story that had developed practically by itself didn't even seem worth thinking about now, and the characters I'd created struck me as utterly hollow. At this rate, it wasn't unthinkable that I might fail to deliver the script on time. For a hotshot writer in high demand, that might not matter so much, but for a lesser-known one like me, it could prove fatal. What to do? If I needed a co-writer, the sooner I asked for one the better. But what could I offer by way of explanation? No one would believe the story about my parents. Should I feign illness? No, I needed the money. I'd already promised Kay that I would buy a car. The intercom chimed. Far from buying a new car, far from moving into a new apartment, I'd soon find myself hard up even for daily necessities if I didn't whip myself back into shape. The intercom sounded again. Who could it be? The producer of my series? He'd never gotten back to me about the first episode. Or perhaps he had, but I wasn't home? I'd been away from the apartment quite a bit without ever turning on the answering machine. I picked up the handset on the intercom and was surprised to hear Mamiya's voice. "Could I come up a minute?" he said. I had no desire to hear of his doings with my ex, but I knew the whole matter would soon start to weigh on my mind if I turned him away. "Sure," I said, and pushed the button to release the security lock. I couldn't very well ask Mamiya for help on work I was doing for another broadcast, but maybe he knew an up-and-coming young writer who could take over for me. I could tactfully inquire about someone like that. The intercom's chime sounded again. When I opened the door, Mamiya looked me sharply in the eye. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Oh, so it's that again," I thought with a smile. He's been worried about my health ever since he ran into me at the hotel. If that's what he's here about, it's already taken care of. As you can see, I'm perfectly fine. Mamiya stepped inside without a word and closed the door behind him. I continued, "When you saw me at the hotel, I was really wrung out from something I'd gotten involved in. But that's all been resolved. I'm fine now. I know it must be astonishing to see me looking so haggard one day and so ruddy the next, but there's really no need to worry anymore. You looked terrible then." He stood looking at me without averting his gaze. "As I say, that was then. This is now. And you look even worse now." I felt a chill, but forced a smile. "Even worse?" I asked, half to myself. I casually raised my right hand and examined the palm. Then I flipped it over to inspect the back. It looked perfectly normal, not bony and ashen as I'd seen it before. Do I look that bad? I asked, lowering myself onto a chair. Don't you ever look in the mirror? Not since getting home a while ago. No, wait. I did glance in the mirror when I went to the bathroom. Then go and take another look. He sat down across from me. I can't believe you're just sitting there as though nothing were wrong. His words echoed Kay's. But now my mother and father were gone. I'd watched them vanish with my own two eyes. Did they still have some kind of power over me? Tell me something, I said, dropping my eyes to my hands again. I certainly couldn't claim my hands were the picture of youth, but neither could they be described as skin and bones. How do my hands look to you? What do you mean, he said, obviously puzzled by my question. Do they look bony and withered? He answered with a simple nod. Did that mean, then, that my parents were still hovering about somewhere in the shadows, giving me an illusion of vitality even as they continued to drain the lifeblood from me? No, not my parents themselves, but rather the unknown power that had allowed them to return to visit me in the first place. Was that power still refusing to release me? There was a woman with you. A woman. Last night, you had a woman here with you. You came by last night? I'd stumbled home and lost consciousness, but I didn't know that Kay had stayed by my side. If Mamiya had come, Kay would have answered the door. She hadn't mentioned anything to me. You looked so bad when I ran into you at the hotel, I decided to drop by late in the afternoon, when I had a break in my schedule. You apparently weren't home. That would have been when I was in Asakusa. Then as I was going about some other business, I started to worry. Maybe you were home after all, but laid up in bed. Maybe you were too weak to even answer the door. So I came back around 9. This time I saw a light in your window. I punched in your number at the door downstairs, but you didn't answer. Fortunately, a guy came out just then, so I grabbed the door when he opened it and slipped inside. I came up here and rang your doorbell. You still didn't answer. Now I was really worried, so I started banging on the door and calling your name. A few moments later, a woman opened the door and told me you were sleeping. I would indeed have been sleeping. When I said I was worried because you looked so emaciated at the hotel, she assured me you were just a little tired and closed the door on me. I had been sensing a note of hostility in Mamiya's voice every time he referred to the woman, and it had started to annoy me. But if Kay had rudely shut the door in his face, I could understand how he might have felt. As I walked away, I had this odd feeling that something wasn't quite right. Not because you had a woman with you or anything like that, but something seemed queer somehow. As the elevator started going down, it suddenly hit me that I had been able to see into your apartment through the narrow crack in the door. I'd seen right through the crack as if the woman wasn't there. The door was only open a crack, and she stood blocking that narrow opening completely, so I shouldn't have been able to see much of anything inside. But it was as though I had seen right through her body. I didn't react visibly, but anger was welling up in me. Not at Mamiya, nor at Kay. It was indignation at the unknown power that had made my parents fade away into nothingness right before my eyes. Was that power now going to take Kay from me too? Mamiya continued. I knew it was ridiculous. My eyes had to be playing tricks on me. Still, I didn't think it was a good idea to leave you in that woman's hands. You looked like a walking ghost at the hotel, yet she insisted you were perfectly fine. Something told me I shouldn't believe her. So I came back today, just after noon. Though I knew Mamiya felt bad toward me, in fact, precisely because he did, I would never have expected him to show so much concern about my well-being. As I was getting out of the cab at the curb, I saw you coming toward the sidewalk. The woman was with you. I hesitated to call out to you, not because you were with the woman, but because you were a changed person. You looked the picture of good health, and if anything, I'd have said you'd put on some weight. Okay, maybe you'd had a really good night's sleep. Even then, how could you look so bad one day and so much better the next? I was flabbergasted. Just then, I noticed a man stand up near the main entrance, where he had been pruning some shrubs. That was Mr. Harada, who just left the building, right? I asked him. He looked like he belonged here, and he was staring after you too. That's right, he nodded. He was in fact the building manager. Then he added, "Talk about spooky." I looked at him and asked what he meant. That woman with him, he said, she looked just like the lady who was in 305. Of course she did. 305 was Kay's apartment. You mean she doesn't live here anymore? I asked. I couldn't see anything particularly strange about you being with someone who'd recently moved out. But that's when he told me. Mamiya paused a moment, as if to heighten the suspense. He said the woman had killed herself near the end of July. Don't be ridiculous. It's some kind of mistake. Apartment 305 was Kay's home for several years now. Saying the tenant of 305 killed herself amounted to saying Kay killed herself. Mamiya was watching my face closely for a response, but I gave him none. It wasn't so much that I wanted to hide my response from him. I was trying to hide it from myself. I did not want to be reacting at all to such a preposterous suggestion. I had no reason to make anything of it at that point, Mamiya said. I mean, many people look like many other people. But I wanted to talk to you. Maybe I was worrying needlessly, but your recovery was simply too sudden. It seemed unreal. So I asked the manager to let me wait in the lobby. Neither of you had been carrying anything, so I figured you couldn't be going far. On the other hand, I had no idea when you'd actually return, and I started wondering again if I might be worrying myself over nothing. Then the manager invited me into his office. He said I'd be more comfortable in there because it was air-conditioned. As I waited for you in his office, he told me a little more about the suicide. The woman had stabbed herself 7 times in the chest with a knife. That's what the police told him anyway. Her family came. The whole matter was dealt with in an orderly, quiet manner. The woman we'd seen with you looked so much like her that he blurted all that out, but before that he'd been careful never to breathe a word of it. The apartment was remodeled right away and rented out to a health foods company for its Tokyo office. What did any of this have to do with Kay? Silently, I continued to resist the implications of Mamiya's account. Then the manager signaled toward the lobby with his eyes, and I peered out the small reception window to see you and the woman getting into the elevator. I rushed from the room and saw the floor indicator stop on 3, so I raced up the stairs to the 3rd floor and opened the door from the stairwell into the hallway, trying not to make any noise. The woman had just unlocked one of the doors, and you were about to go inside. That's number 305, the manager whispered behind me. It's scary how much she looks like the woman who killed herself. This was all happening in broad daylight, so it almost seemed silly, but I knew I had to get you out of there. I rushed up the hall to the apartment you'd entered and pushed the intercom button and started pounding on the door. The manager was with me too. A young man came to the door right away, and I told him we wanted to see the two people who'd just gone in, but he denied that anyone had entered. That's crazy, the manager broke in. We both saw them go in just now. Then come on in and see for yourselves, the other fellow said, stepping aside to let us through. It was a small, one-room office, and we could see right away that no one else was there. Just to be sure, we checked the toilet and bath too, but we couldn't find any trace of you or the woman. Having recounted this much in a torrent, Namiya looked me in the eye again. Where were you? He demanded. This woman who killed herself, I said. Why did she do it? She apparently had an ugly burn on her chest. Plastic surgery hadn't helped much, I guess, even after several operations. So she kept almost entirely to herself, and they think she probably just couldn't stand the loneliness anymore. I closed my eyes. Her name was Katsura Fujino, Mamiya went on. But on her lease papers for the apartment, she had given Kei as the reading for the character Katsura. Look, I borrowed a spare key from the manager. Why don't we go check out number 305 together? You can see if it's the apartment you went into this afternoon. That won't be necessary, I said. I really think you should. It'll give you the strength to resist. Resist what? Kei, I don't know if these'll do us any good, Mamiya said, taking 2 rosaries from the pocket of the suit jacket draped over his arm, but I want you to take one. Forget it. We can't forget it. Please. It's embarrassing enough that I've been duped. Don't make me verify it. You're being awful easy. It hardly seems like you. Why don't you tell me I'm talking nonsense? How could this be anything but nonsense? Mamiya knew nothing of my mother and father, so my ready acceptance of his horror story understandably caught him by surprise. But I had already accepted the inevitable. So recently had I been merrily planning a new life with Kei, so suddenly I knew I could never make it happen. All right then, Mamiya said. Let's get out of here. We need to get you away from this place as quickly as we can. You can stay at my house. Or if you don't want to do that, we can get you a hotel room. I studied my hands. I had to assume that I still could not see their true condition. They did not look like skin and bones. They looked like the fleshy hands I had always known. Clearly, Kei continued to exert power over me. Was she aware that she had been exposed? I longed for a chance to at least say goodbye. Kei was right. I was happier with the false impression. I would have been happy living with Kei, believing mistakenly that she was alive. Come on. We can figure out what to do after we've gotten you away from here. I nodded once and rose to my feet. Kei probably wouldn't appear while Mamiya was with me anyway. Not that I meant to shake off Mamiya, whose concern for me I didn't fail to appreciate. I need to turn off the air conditioner, I said. I'll get it. I thought it might take him a moment or two to figure out the controls, but he promptly switched it off and strode to the door to wait for me. I took just my wallet from a drawer and slipped it into my hip pocket. As I started putting on my shoes, Namiya pushed the door open and stepped outside. I felt him stiffen. I looked up. Namiya stood frozen with the open door at his back, staring off toward the elevator. It's Kei, I thought. Kei was here. Don't come out, Mamiya hissed at me. Ignoring his warning, I stepped into the hallway. Kei stood in front of the elevator, some 10 meters away, gazing steadily in our direction. She wore the white, sleeveless house dress that came down nearly to her ankles. Kei, don't talk to her, Mamiya cried. I doubted he had any profound basis for this admonition. Perhaps he was thinking of an ancient taboo against communing with the dead. Kei was looking at me. Her eyes were like a serious schoolgirl's. Mamiya was exhorting me not to talk to her. No matter how intimate we may have been before, now that I knew she was a ghost, I had to regard her as hostile. Yet, once we stood face to face again, I could not bear to think of her in those terms. This was the woman who had clung to my neck and prayed desperately for me. What would turning against her and driving her away as an accursed being accomplish, other than condemn me to an empty, joyless future? Kei, I heard your story, I said. Don't. Mamiya shrieked. Raising his rosary over folded hands, he shouted, hurling the words at Kei, Namu Myoho Renjikyo. Glory to the supreme law of the Lotus Sutra. Hoping to annul the power of the incantation, I, too, lifted my voice. Kei, we'll be together. I don't care what happens to me. My dear Kei, are you out of your mind? Mamiya cried, his rosaried hands still thrust out toward Kei. Kei took a step toward us. Mamiya quickly took a step backward and chanted once more, Namu Myoho Renjikyo. She took a second step. Harada-san, what sect does she belong to? Mamiya asked frantically. I don't think she's religious. How about her family then? They must belong somewhere. I haven't the foggiest. Would you not be so relaxed? This is really happening. My eyes remained fixed on Kei's and hers on mine. Without ever shifting her gaze, she continued taking one step, then another, slowly closing the distance between us. She's coming closer, Mamiya cried, his entire body shaking. She's coming. She's coming. Stand back, Mamiya-san, I said, still watching Kei. But I've already got my back against the wall. Indeed, the 7th floor hallway ended a short distance past my door. Don't worry. She won't hurt you. Kei continued her advance. Of course not, I thought. She's not going to hurt anyone. Wasn't there some way for us to work this out? Wasn't there some way for us to live together? She kept coming. 5 more steps and she would be standing right in front of me. Step. I remained still. Why? Step. Why did I stand frozen to the spot? Step. Why hadn't I gone to her and taken her in my arms? Step. She faced me, only a single step away. Kei, I said. Her eyes were as cold as death. I had been searching them for signs of life as she approached, but even now, even at close quarters, I could discern no ray of warmth in them. They remained fixed on me in a frigid, icy stare. Her unpainted lips moved, parting ever so slightly as though preparing to speak. Then they began to form words. I'm sure you remember. A deep voice. A voice filled with scorn. Remember what? The venom in her words made my voice quiver. The night of the champagne. Huh. That would be the night I brusquely turned her away from my door. The days of the blow dealt me by Mamiya had left me in no mood for social chit-chat. I had regretted my coldness almost immediately. I didn't really believe she would kill herself, but the thought had occurred to me, and I'd even gone so far as to look for a light in her window on a rainy night. Now I knew. On that very night, Kay had stabbed herself in the chest 7 times. "I'll drag you down with me," she hissed, pressing another step closer. I reflexively fell back, but she immediately closed the gap again. Try as I might to hold my ground, I found myself pushed backward once more by the violent hatred emanating from her 2 eyes, glaring at me from only a few centimeters away. It was as if I'd been physically shoved. Did this mean it had all been an act, a charade she'd gone through solely to destroy me? What had seemed so much like love, was it all motivated by hatred? Then it wasn't love that made her plead with me so to stop visiting my parents lest it kill me? As if she'd read my mind, her eyes now turned mocking. "Naive man," she spat out. "No, this wasn't fair. A complete stranger declines your invitation to share a drink, and for that you drag him down to hell with you? Madness. Even if life was always more or less like that." My back was against the wall. I could retreat no further. "Go on living, then," her eyes snarled. Or, more accurately, her lips did, but she now stood so close that I could see only her eyes. "You can have your precious little life. Then you won't drag me down with you after all?" "Not won't, those same," I said. "Can't. By the time you came out of the apartment, at heart you were no longer with me." Even as you mouthed those pretty phrases about staying together, your heart was far away. Though I had not been conscious of this separation, her words somehow rang true. So that was how it worked. She couldn't drain my lifeblood unless I loved her from my heart. The laws of the other world were difficult to fathom. "I will go now without taking your life, but not because I care for you in the least." I felt dizzy. Suddenly she was moving backward, her figure receding as though gliding on ice. On her way toward me, she had punctuated her progress step by step, but her retreat came in a single swift motion that carried her nearly 4 meters away at once. It seemed she was already well on her way back into the realm of the dead. Then I noticed something on the front of her white house dress. A black spot appeared on her chest and began to grow. No, not black, I realized as the color spread rapidly across the white fabric, but red. The red of freshly flowing blood. From the very chest she had been at such pains to conceal, gloriously red blood welled forth as from a living being. The blood pulsed forth to a sound like a beating heart and formed into rivulets as it streamed down the front of her dress. I looked into Kay's eyes. She stood motionless, as though in mute endurance of the spilling blood. Then her figure began to fade. As with my parents, the end came swiftly. Moment by moment, she grew more transparent, until suddenly I realized I was seeing only an afterimage. It lingered briefly like the shimmering of hot air, and then it too was gone. The dimly lit 7th floor hallway stood empty before me. Not a single drop of blood stained the floor. I heard Mamiya letting out a deep breath. I could not move. In spite of her parting words, spoken with such venom, I thought I had spied a note of sadness in Kay's eyes, a genuine sorrow of parting, in the last instant before she finally faded away. I was incorrigible.